It is Friday, October 2nd. Let's talk PlayStation. Well, it's pretty crazy to think about this, but we can actually say that next month we will have PlayStation 5. I think we're sitting at 6 or 7 more Fridays to go before the console's here, so 6 or 7 more of these news videos. And until then, we have to keep covering the platform, so let's get into that. But first off, our PlayStation Plus reminder, you only have a few days left to grab September's games. October 6th is when the new games will go up, and that is Vampire and Need for Speed Payback. So I think this is, generally speaking, kind of an okay month, but it's in that middle ground that we often talk about here. If they're smaller scale games that are more niche, people feel that they don't get value out of Plus. If they're higher caliber titles, then that's great, but it also increases the probability that you might already own that game. And so for something like Vampire and Need for Speed, you might not have actually tried these or played them when they came out. So worth at least checking out, even if you don't like them. Ideally, you'd want them to be enjoyable, but I think it's more of an okay month. Anyway, for our first news story, if you remember a few weeks back, we were talking about Doritos partnering with PlayStation to give away some PS5 consoles, and that was really one of the first examples of PlayStation really kicking off their marketing campaign for the console and doing the typical tie-ins with other brands. So Doritos is one of the first ones that we're seeing for PS5. Well, anyway, the formal announcement of this competition has finally been made, so the details are all out there now on the PlayStation blog. It is in fact only for Europe and most European territories, so you can check out all the details. They're giving away not just PS5s, but also PlayStation prizes in general. So you can buy a bag of Doritos and participate, enter your code into the main website. You can see if you won a prize. There's also an augmented reality game on the side of it as well. Kind of strange, but we're also seeing Microsoft, I think, do the Taco Bell tie-in this time around also. For our next news story, we've got another update on the Uncharted movie. It seems like things are really coming along, or at least from Tom Holland's perspective, where over on Twitter he sent out this tweet. He says, "Great chatting with you, Neil Druckmann. Big fan of your work, and I hope you are," and I think he's trying to say okay here, "and I hope you are okay with what we're doing with the Uncharted movie." Naughty Dog's Neil Druckmann does respond. He says, "Yeah, dude, love talking games with you and your bro. Also, that set looks insane. Good luck with the rest of the shoot." So much like the process of making games, pre-production is where you're going to have a major hang-up and a project could get stalled for a very long time, and Uncharted's another excellent example of this. Well, the film at least, where it went through multiple script rewrites, different directors, fielding out talent to actually star in the film. We've gone through different Nathan Drakes, different Sullys, but now that that process is behind us and we're actually a few weeks into principal photography, it seems as though, pending any major challenges, this film might actually come out for its targeted date of July 16th, 2021, but that's also assuming that they have a good distribution plan, pending any major challenges with COVID as well. So if there's any encouraging thing that we can say about the film, it's probably that. But anyway, in keeping with our Naughty Dog news, if you remember last Saturday, that was The Last of Us Day, formerly known as Outbreak Day. No major news came out of that, unfortunately. However, Naughty Dog did announce a new PS4 theme, a new board game for The Last of Us. They ran a contest, some new statues, a sale on their merchandise. We also saw them release a lot of gifts online, so it'd be great to have some of those come into circulation. But really, Naughty Dog's Neil Druckmann did indirectly acknowledge what we wanted to learn about over on Twitter, where he says, "Thank you to all the wonderful fans for an incredible The Last of Us Day. Your positivity and love is incredibly inspiring. Oh, and about that other thing, be patient, it'll be worth it." Considering that Factions multiplayer is the only publicly announced Naughty Dog project right now, alongside the fact that this was The Last of Us Day, he's probably referring to that. Now, our last update for Factions was 8 or 9 seconds of footage leaking online, and that's really all we have, just that footage, and it was very blurry, you couldn't really get much from it. And then we had Neil Druckmann not being very direct in answering questions about Factions once The Last of Us Part 2 shipped a few months back. So it's safe to assume that the original announcement a year ago of single player and multiplayer being split off because they just got too large, and we know that's the case for the single player. I think it actually is a little too long, and some of those levels really open up in terms of scope. But anyway, we know that was the case for single player, probably still the case for multiplayer, and they're probably not as far along as they would have liked. Otherwise, they would have shown something on Saturdays. So it seems like we might be waiting a little bit longer before we actually see Factions come up again. Now, moving on to our next news story, or really a series of news stories for some PlayStation Studio titles on PS5. Sony recently gave us a lot of new details this week about some of these games, and I think we'll start with Spider-Man Remastered because arguably there's a fair amount to cover here. Over on the PlayStation blog, Insomniac Games has detailed some of the features and enhancements that we'll see on the remastered PS5 version, and that includes ray traced reflections and ambient shadows, new sky and weather effects, high fidelity skin, eyes, and teeth shaders for characters, that high frame rate performance mode, we knew about that, near instant loading, and ironically there's an option to turn on the original fast travel animations if you miss those. Also spatial 3D audio, DualSense haptics, and support for adaptive triggers. The Amazing Suit is also going to be a new suit available alongside 2 other ones that will be announced closer to launch, and there's also enhancements to photo mode as well. The same features that we heard about in Miles Morales will also be available in the 2018 remaster. The biggest change, however, is the new face model for Peter Parker. So in the original 2018 release, we had John Bubniak as the face model, but voice talent and facial capture was done by Yuri Lowenthal. And now going into PlayStation 5, Ben Jordan will be the new face model, and Yuri Lowenthal will still retain his facial capture and voice talent. Insomniac's rationale here is that Ben Jordan's face model better represents the performance that Yuri Lowenthal delivered to the character. So it goes without saying that anytime you make a major change to a beloved character in an established franchise, there's going to be some backlash, and that is absolutely what's happened here. So over on Twitter, the creative director at Insomniac Games, Brian Inahar, has already responded to this, where he says, "We care as much about this character as your attachment to him, so please know we didn't make this decision or change lightly. As we did throughout the development of Marvel's Spider-Man, we'll continue to read your comments, listen, always be looking for ways to improve every facet of the game. At the same time, I hope you can trust us that this decision is what we feel is best for the future of the franchise and our upcoming goals for this beloved Marvel character." Now, the first thing to take away from all this, or at least more specifically from just that quote, and if it wasn't obvious, this is the Peter Parker face model moving forward beyond the 2018 remaster, so it seems they have every intention of using this face model for the eventual sequels of Peter Parker's story. That's why Brian's being somewhat direct in saying, look, you have to trust us, this is for the future of what we want to accomplish for this franchise. So whether you like it or not, as of right now, this is Peter Parker. And what we can also take away from the entire PlayStation blog write-up is that we have context on all the enhancements of the game and probably why they're being adamant about charging for the game. I know a lot of people are getting very hung up on how it's being stuck with Miles Morales. I wouldn't get too caught up on that, because eventually they will unbundle them. That's almost a certainty. They're not going to remaster an entire game just to leave it stuck to Miles Morales. Eventually they'll unbundle it. It's just that this is a clear indication that it will never be a free upgrade, and you will have to pay some form of cash. And this is a laundry list of improvements. This is not your typical frame rate and resolution bump. They're actually doing a lot to the game, and they have released some footage. I've probably been displaying it to you right now. Always keep in mind that if you're watching it online, it's going to be compressed. It's not going to look as good as it would if it were right in front of you. And actually, the footage that I have to use, I often have to pull from them. So it has another layer of compression from what I'm showing you. But that's something to always be mindful of when you're watching any gameplay online. But from what we're reading so far, I mean, that's a healthy amount of work that they're putting into the game. And we already know that they've been benchmarking Spider-Man on PlayStation 5 hardware for a while, and they've already been candid about how it's been about a year's worth of work for getting the enhancements into Spider-Man on PlayStation 5. As for the face model swap, I know it's easy to have a gut reaction in a negative way, but like I said, if it's an established franchise, beloved character, it's a recipe for disaster. And when I first saw the face, I had a double take moment. Like, whoa, Tom Holland. Like, that must have been really expensive. But no, you sit there, you look longer, you realize it's not Tom Holland. It's a young face that looks a lot like Tom Holland in your peripheral vision, or perhaps a Tom Holland deep fake, and that's a sentiment many people shared, and I'd agree with them there. But Ben's face is naturally young looking for a character that, in the context of the story, is supposed to be a young adult Peter Parker, so there is a difference in the appearance of age for that character, and that's where people are getting rather upset. And I can see where people are coming from. I guess it doesn't bother me too much for this situation, because, I don't know, I mean, for me personally, I know if I shave my face, I look like I'm 17 years old, and I'm in my late 20s. I know a lot of people like that. I know you know a lot of people like that. It's not unheard of to say that somebody looks young, but they're older than they appear to be. So why can't that be the case for games? I think this is more a case of people just getting attached to what they know best or what they're used to, and that's the first game, how the first Peter Parker looks. And this happens across not just games, but any form of media that has some modifications and changes over the years. And honestly, it can bother me too. It's one of my bigger pet peeves, but more specifically for a voice change. Voice is really hard to replicate, and so if you have to go with a different voice actor or actress, that's where you really lose me, and it kills the immersion and the commitment to that character. I'm more open to changes of appearance and things like that, because it's just natural to expect over time, or with multiple sequels or whatever, that the character has an evolution of appearance. Even the 2018 God of War, though, was an interesting outlier where that game got away with doing a lot for Kratos as a character, but that's probably because there wasn't much emotional attachment to Kratos or his story within the PS2 and PSP games. For something like Infamous 1 to 2, if you don't remember, Infamous 2 had a major character redesign where, I mean, that wasn't even Cole. That was a different person entirely, so the backlash there was enough and I think warranted, and Sucker Punch knew that it was early enough in development to dial back to the original Cole, and, you know, that made sense, but really, it's just a number of factors. But for something like this, if you're going to change Peter Parker, the voice is still there. You're doing it for a remaster to ease people into it for the eventual sequels. This is a character that just inherently has had many appearances and many different characters and takes, so I think this is fine. I wouldn't get too hung up on this. But anyway, let's move on to our next PlayStation Studio title here, Destruction AllStars, PS5 launch exclusive. We just talked about this in the Monday video where it was a PS5 buyer's guide, and towards the end talking about launch games. This is kind of a elephant in the room, or really a nobody in the room, because it commands a $70 price tag. We've only seen one trailer. We don't really know a whole lot about it. So why would somebody pre-order or buy this game? Well, anyway, over on the PlayStation blog, we finally got a write-up on how the game plays and what we can expect out of it. And I don't think it's really all that revealing, considering that if you watch the trailer enough times, you pick up on some of these things. But anyway, the blog doesn't actually describe win conditions, just that there are multiple game modes that you can expect, single player and multiplayer, but it is very much a mix of car combat, slamming into each other, but also your character being on foot, so there's platforming elements as well. So you can either run around the stadium next to the cars themselves, or you can be on top of platforms above the cars, and certain things that you do or jump over or access or activate up there will trigger bombs and effects down below to possibly knock out or blow up opponents. And every single character has their own special abilities, so much like the nomenclature of the title of the game, All-Stars, there's a roster of characters and they all have their own unique abilities, not just for them on foot, but also for their particular vehicle. And they're really trying to push that this could be a long-term game with a lot of updates, because they're already confirming that there will be updates down the road. This game has an interesting identity in that it has potential, I think, to go somewhere. But for something like Destruction AllStars, it is very much a game that is leaning on the fact that it's launching with a brand new platform. Naturally, one would think, okay, well, if the game's not projected to do well on PS5, why don't you ship it on PS4? Over 100 million users worldwide. Game might have a better chance at life there. But there are disadvantages to shipping on something like PS4, where it does have a large install base, but that doesn't guarantee much of anything. The mind share of a consumer that's currently playing on PS4, where they might already be playing a vast library that they own, or they might be already active on other online games, there's a mind share that you're fighting against there. And so for something like PlayStation 5, and we've seen this with other console launches, you can test a new IP, you can test something that's more experimental, and often at launch, a consumer that's buying at launch, they're an early adopter. On average, they spend more money. They're more willing to buy software for their brand new console, and they might be willing to buy something that they normally wouldn't have bought if it were, say, on PlayStation 4, if that makes sense. So Destruction AllStars, I think, really is falling into that category of game here, and that's actually what's drawing me to it. So I can't wait to actually give it a fair shake, because I know most people probably won't. Moving on, though, we also have an update for Returnal. Now, this is Housemarque's PlayStation Studios game, and I'm loving what I'm seeing so far. This is also, this is climbing up my list in terms of excitement and things I can't wait to play on PlayStation 5. So the product page here gave us some new screenshots, but also a quick synopsis where it says, after crash landing on this shape-shifting world, Celine must search through the barren landscape of an ancient civilization for her escape. Isolated and alone, she finds herself fighting tooth and nail for survival. Again and again, she's defeated, forced to restart her journey every time she dies. Now, to be fair, the original trailer already gave us a good idea of what the gameplay loop and general setup looks like, but if you didn't know or you're still curious, the product page does spell this out for you and confirm for you. It's a third-person roguelike shooter. It's bullet hell combat, which, if you don't know, bullet hell is just... it's a lot of stuff on screen, which is exactly what Housemarque is known for what is most of their portfolio of top-down shooters. It's just a lot of stuff on screen that you have to manage and dodge away from and things like that. You're managing equipment and resources, you're upgrading your alien equipment, you're looking for fragments of Celine's memories to piece together why you're there. Remember, every time you die, you're restarting from fresh and you're getting this whole new environment. It really sounds like an evolution of Housemarque, where they are known for that bullet hell chaoticness on screen, and that's still the case here, but it's third person. This is not what they normally do, and this is when they openly admitted a few years back now that, look, arcade's dead, we can't do this top-down stuff anymore, it just doesn't sell, it doesn't do nearly as well nowadays, and they found a way to take a lot of those things and apply it to what is this now third-person roguelike, and I'm just loving everything I hear about it, so I'm really excited for this game. I can't wait to see how it turns out. Now, let's go over some of the pre-order bonuses for these games. This is also something that Sony outlined this past week for their PS5 exclusives that are launching on day one. So, for Demon's Souls, if you pre-order, you're getting the Red Eye Knight armor, Bullet Terran Royalty armor, Hoplite Shield, Ritual Blade, original soundtrack, a ton of additional items, and a Reaper Scythe weapon. If you pre-order Spider-Man Miles Morales, you're also getting the tracksuit, and then another unannounced suit that they'll talk about closer to launch, Gravity Well gadget, 3 extra skill points. If you pre-order Sackboy A Big Adventure, you're getting a digital art book, digital soundtrack, 4 Sackboy costumes for Connor, Jin, Deacon, and Sam Porter Bridges. I just love the fact that we're seeing Sackboy costumes again. That's awesome, especially for PlayStation IP. 4 Sackboy emotes, also 20 Sackboy avatars. That special edition with the Sackboy plush, that's up for pre-order too, but that's only for the PS4 version, so that's a bit of a bummer, but it's still upgradable, so you can buy that copy of the game, still get the PS5 edition if you plan on playing the game on PS5. And then Destruction AllStars, you're getting 10,000 All-Star coins, so that's in-game currency. So this is also a little iffy for people that maybe this game will turn into a, microtransaction heavy game, but remains to be seen about that. Profile banner set, in-game avatar set, exclusive character emotes, and then a legendary skin for one of the characters, Lupita. So those are all the bonuses for PlayStation Studio games on day one for PS5. Third parties have already outlined what they're doing as well. I think we also learned about Godfall 2-3 weeks ago if you want pre-order bonuses for that game. Technically PS5 console launch exclusive, also available on PC, but a lot of goodies coming up. I often don't even enter these things in half the time when I buy games, but if you're into them, you're getting a lot of stuff. For our next news story, for European newsletter, is anything to go by, then it looks like Final Fantasy XVI is getting a provisional rating of PEGI 18, or rated M for mature. Now, this doesn't mean the game's actually getting rated, that's a few years away, just that right now, Square Enix is fully expecting the game to get PEGI 18, and this is huge news, and it's surprising and also not surprising, because it's not surprising if you watch the trailer. I mean, there's blood and gore everywhere. Pretty much guarantees the game's going to get an M or an 18+. Just that, well, within the Final Fantasy franchise, and certainly for the mainline games, this is not common. It's pretty much non-existent. They always go for high fantasy, but no blood, gore, violence. I mean, they're really limited if you get that teen rating. So the fact that it's expected means Square's probably going all in on this rating, and they can do a lot more with rated M. They can explore a lot of different themes. They can be more overtly violent and show more on screen with blood and gore. And to be fair, if you put enough blood and gore on screen, you're going to get rated M or PEGI 18. So it doesn't really matter what you're doing in the context of displaying all that blood and violence. Previous Final Fantasies had violent themes and moments, just that there's nothing on screen to convey that moment, and so that's why they can get away with rated T and this high fantasy cartoon violence in previous entries. But for something like this, it seems like they are going for more of an edgy look, and they might be exploring different topics that they weren't able to do or wouldn't have made sense in previous Final Fantasies. Either way, it's something that the franchise isn't well known for, and so it could get interesting. Now, while we're on the topic of this game, one thing that many people have noticed is that it wasn't visually impressive from the initial trailer that we saw, especially if you were to compare it to Final Fantasy VII Remake or Final Fantasy 15. Well, one of the producers, Naoki Yoshida, did respond to this, mentioning during the Tokyo Game Show, "I didn't want the trailer to be just a rendered cutscene and bam, logo." He says, "I wanted to use the resources that were moving in-game in real time, but the timing wasn't the best for it. We haven't tuned it or optimized it yet, so there is a lot of work to be done. But if we released a pre-rendered trailer, they would say, 'Alright, see you in 2035. I've seen those kinds of comments from America, so we really want to show something that was actually in-game. We haven't shown the highlights of the game in this trailer, so that will come later when we make it properly.'" I find it so hilarious that he openly acknowledges what is so commonplace here in the West when it comes to the conversation around games. Oh, another pre-rendered trailer? Oh, great, see you 5-10 years from now. But that is a problem with Square Enix, and it's good to be self-aware of your issues. So yeah, they're criticisms, but they're valid criticisms. I mean, I know it's fun to see another pre-rendered trailer or a teaser, just like God of War we had, for example. I mean, I know it's fun to see those things. It gets you fired up. Just knowing the very existence of a title is what's exciting. But you know what's more exciting? Seeing a trailer like they showed for Final Fantasy 16, where it was lengthy, a lot of cuts, a lot of gameplay. It showed you that the title was far along, and so I actually applaud the fact that while it wasn't super optimized and it wasn't visually stunning and it didn't blow me away, what blew me away more is that here is the next major entry in Final Fantasy, and we have a lot to show you. Next up, we've got another PS4 to PS5 upgrade confirmed that we also added last minute into our Wednesday video about all the PS4 to PS5 upgrades we have so far. Yakuza Like a Dragon, when it ships specifically on PS5, March 2021, comes a little bit after the PS4 version. That's a free upgrade from PS4 to PS5. But the greater news story here is that the save files for the PS4 version don't transfer to PS5, and this is not the first time we've seen this. So for the 2018 Spider-Man Remaster, no file transfer. However, Miles Morales will feature save file transfer. We have Maneater, that won't do save file transfer. Dirt 5 won't do it. I think NBA, it's only for a certain mode. Same with FIFA. It's not consistent whatsoever, and there are differences that need to be considered, like PS4 to PS5 upgrades, then PS4 games being played on PS5 through backwards compatibility. Then there's live service-based games like Marvel's Avengers or Destiny, and those support save file transfers, but that might just be more a matter of progress being saved and moved over because it's just your PSN ID. All that stuff is saved on their side, and so your player progress and things like that might just naturally be there once you show up on PS5. But for PS4 games and PS5 upgrades, what we're looking at is probably a matter of how Sony handles save files. And so it seems like native PlayStation 5 games can't just read PS4 save files no problem. Once you do an upgrade path, you're looking at a different management system for save files, and that's where developers would have to intervene and actually offer some kind of fix for that. And that's why some games work and some games don't. And that's why if you're playing PS4 games through backwards compatibility, in theory you should have no major issue because it's a PS4 game no matter what. At the end of the day, right? It's still a PS4 game. And so it would still be handling a PS4 save file as if it's a PS4 game. This, of course, seems like a big difference from Microsoft because on their end, pretty much all save files are working up and down the board, and that's just a matter of how they handle save files. So this is how these games are made from the ground up, and if Sony mandates it, and if they don't, clearly they're not mandating it, so developers are choosing just not to support save file transfer. And so it's problematic when you start to consider what games you want to actually carry over, or considering buying on PS4, hoping that you'll be able to carry over your progress to PS5, but that might not be the case depending on the game. So it's another disappointing revelation so far about PS5. Obviously, a lot of the bad stuff starting to come out as we get closer to launch. It seemed like everything was doing so well up until, oh, here's this little thing, here's that little thing, oh, that's a little larger, oh, now this is a pretty big deal. And so, you know, it's not a huge issue, and certainly once we're 3-4 years into PlayStation 5, it becomes kind of irrelevant because most people will be just playing on PS5 from the ground up, and you're not even really worrying about transferring anything from PlayStation 4. Just in the short term, it could be a problem. Now, moving on, last Saturday, a day after Let's Talk PlayStation, this showed up on Instagram. The rapper Travis Scott apparently has at least a DualSense. Makes it seem as though he has a PlayStation 5, but at least a DualSense. The picture shows the controller in his lap. That is his lap, not a couch. He says, "I will be playing until the sun up." And that's it. We haven't heard anything since. As far as we know, not many people at all have access to this hardware. DualSense, we know that some people have been able to hold the controller and play around with it, and so you either have to be this wildly famous to get some sort of access from Sony, or, I mean, obviously it wouldn't make much sense to fake it from his perspective. I guess that'd be a little strange, or a weird flex to act as though you have a PlayStation 5 when you really don't. We're still expecting Japanese YouTubers to play and upload videos of PlayStation 5 access on October 4th. We have no idea about the West having access or anything like that right now. It's interesting. It's not really a picture that you expected to show up on the internet. Now, we do have another DualSense that showed up, this one from the company EV Zenlight, and what this company does is modified controllers, custom controllers, things like that. So it looks like they got this DualSense to take apart, benchmark, tinker with. They're probably trying to get a product ready to go day one for PS5 or close to it. It looks like they're trying to modify it to add back buttons or something like that. I mean, you can expect things like this to happen, but they're trying to get this ready to go fairly soon, you'd imagine. And they did post some pictures of the controller. Nothing super revealing. I mean, we see the inside of it, some close-up shots, but the only thing that we can really learn from what is kind of a weird overly watermarked picture is that, well, the controller's going to be more complicated to take apart and mess with than, say, a DualShock 4 or 3 or whatever, but that was kind of expected given we know what's inside it. For our next news story, we have a minor update to the PS5 pre-order debacle. So what we saw this week was GameStop Ireland reach out to customers, informing them that due to unforeseen circumstances, they may not get their consoles on day one. And this is not surprising, because I remember GameStop Ireland, a few stores or whatever, I don't know how widespread this was, but some of them were accepting pre-orders well before the PS5 showcase, which is a huge problem. You have no idea what your allocation is. And then once pre-orders did go live, obviously they took more, so that's just layering another problem on what was already a problem. So that's self-explanatory. We also saw the retailer Shop2 reach out to customers. Hey, you might not get it day one. Amazon did the same thing, I think, 2 weeks ago or 1.5 weeks ago, something like that. I don't think we mentioned it here. And same thing for Series X. I think that's just them trying to cover themselves, and honestly, I can't really blame them, because you're going to have a lot of angry customers if they don't get it day one and the Amazon dashboard says it's going to be coming day one. I mean, this stuff was inevitable. It happens every console launch. It really does, to some extent. I mean, I know it's fun to join in and say this has been awful, how Sony handled it, even Microsoft didn't do that well, bots have been taking everything, but it's a desirable product. It really is. So it just... anybody could have seen this coming a mile away. Also, I feel like this is probably the best place to place us here, but India, we have no idea. So a few people have reached out to me about PlayStation 5 in India, no price, availability, they have no clue what's going on. I mean, it seems obvious that whatever they're doing there, they're not ready to talk about it just yet. I know it's probably severely disappointing if you live in India right now and you're looking forward to this console, but Sony hasn't outlined anything as far as I know, and I've got no good contacts to anybody out there that would have any idea about that, so that's a waiting game, and it really sucks that you're not being fed any information outside of what we know for everybody else. Moving on to our next news story, it looks like we might have learned about some PlayStation 5 features by accident, kind of like a leak. I don't know if that's really appropriate. I might use that for the title just because it would be weird to name it any other way, but this is one of those cases where one particular link on PlayStation.com, in the webpage source code, there are references to features and things that we haven't heard or seen before. So in the source code, there are references to backwards compatibility where it says playing PS4 games on PS5, some functionality is available on PS4, it may not be available. So that's like a standard disclaimer. It says see PlayStation.com/PS5 backwards compatibility for more details. That's a dead link. There's another disclaimer that says this PS4 game isn't supported with your PS5's current system software. We're continuing to make more PS4 games playable on PS5. Update your PS5 and then try playing that game again. PS5 boost mode enabled. Forced vibration or adaptive trigger references. Console sharing, so it talks about console sharing and offline play. Seems pretty straightforward. It says setting is enabled for your PS5. Players aged 18 plus who aren't PS Now subscribers will be able to play PS Now games from the game's shortcut icon displayed on the PS5 home screen. It mentions message and voice chat functions with friends across PS4, PS5, and the PlayStation mobile app. PlayStation Plus cloud saves can be transferred manually to PS Now, vice versa. Save data management functionality for PS5. But it also says something about wish lists, parties for up to 100 players, which is crazy. Sharing video clips, albums, artists, playlists, tracks with friends. You can initiate something called a takedown, changing party names and images, and also the PS Store will show what games are on PS Plus, PS Now, and the PS Plus collection. So some kind of filter to show you what games are available from what particular service. So pretty interesting stuff. I've always wanted wish lists on the console directly. It's insane that we never got that. I can't believe it, and this doesn't guarantee that we'll get it, but it seems like that is something that's on the docket for coming up on PS5. Also, seeing 100 player party chats, I mean, that's insane. We just got 16 on PS4, and that sounds like way too many people. I'm seeing many get concerned about the disclaimer about PS4 games being playable on PS5 based on your current system software, because many are taking it to think that Sony has to update more games on a rolling basis, and so it won't be most PS4 games on day one. Rather, it might be a selection of titles, and you'll have to wait until your favorite games actually get supported for PS5 playability. So depending on where you look for this info, you're seeing the wrong stuff, but remember, we've been told on 2 occasions now, very directly, the vast majority of PS4 games are playable on PlayStation 5, 99% of the library, day one. It's just a matter of boosted frequencies. That's what Sony's really benchmarking to make sure that these games aren't broken by boosted frequency, thus it might play in a native mode, but even then, inherently, 1% fringe case games might not work, and you have to understand that there needs to be a disclaimer for that 1%. It's small, but out of 4,000 plus titles, we're talking about 40-something games. 40 doesn't sound like a lot compared to 4,000, but let's say I held 40 boxed games right in front of me right now, and that'll look like a lot of games. And chances are there's going to be somebody that has one of those titles, tries to play it on PS5, and you don't want them to think that the game doesn't work or for some reason their copy is broken or what have you, right? You want to warn the customer that there's a reason why that game doesn't work and that support might come down the road. There has to be a disclaimer for that 1%. I'm guessing that's what that is. But seeing PS5 boost mode enabled being referenced is a good segue to our next news story. If you didn't see, this past week, Microsoft lifted the embargo for press coverage on Xbox Series X, the prototype consoles that they let everyone play around with. And yes, it's another Xbox news story, but you have to understand we can draw some great parallels from this, especially from this circumstance where Microsoft's particular coverage this time around, what they have required or rather limited the press to is that they can't play Series X games, just backwards compatible titles. So Xbox One, most games work. 360, around 500 games. There's 39 original Xbox games, but they're only allowed to test and benchmark previous generation games. And this is where we can talk about something like PlayStation 5, because this is where we know PS5 excels based on those SSD speeds. And so for Series X, very impressive numbers across the board. Games are booting very quick. Load screens are cut across the board for most games. If it's got a dynamic resolution, of course, Series X is hitting that no problem. If it's got an unlocked frame rate, of course, it's hitting 60 no problem. If it's capped at 30, but it's a game that never really ran all that well, Series X is just brute forcing it to where the game runs at a solid 30. And this is the kind of stuff where I really want to see how PS5 handles playing PS4 games. Now, depending on frame rate resolution, probably going to be similar results to Series X, because if it's a capped frame rate and it dips a little bit below 30 or whatever, PS5 will push it to 30 and that's where it'll stay. It can't go beyond that, but it'll cap it at 30, unlock frame rates. If it's floating around 45, 50 or whatever, PS5 should get it to 60 no problem. It's a title-by-title basis, of course. Depends on if it's an unlocked frame rate, dynamic resolution. In that case, PS5 would push it up to 4K, so we can expect good results there. But for something like loading, we know that this is where PS5 excels, and I think this is why Mark Cerny went out of their way to say that we really have to test these games to make sure boosted frequencies don't mess up these games, otherwise they have to play in a native mode, because I would have to imagine certain hard-coded aspects of games, depending on how fast PS5's boosted frequency would load certain sections of a game, whether it's just a regular level load, a respawn. If it's too fast, I mean, it could force the game into this weird spot that it doesn't understand, and it could crash it every single time for whatever section of the game that you're actually in. So I can see how it might be an actual concern for Sony when actually running these PS4 games at boosted frequencies, but this is an area where PlayStation 5 could excel and we could see much better numbers. Now, with all that out of the way, it's time to get to Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I'd like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter. If you would like to win a $10 PSN code, very simple. Follow the link down below. We do this every single week on Let's Talk PlayStation. Supporting this channel in a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week because I'm trying to pay for your games. Those are all the news stories that I want to talk about with you all. 2 videos this week. Monday, a PS5 buying guide, all the accessories, third-party SSDs, the launch games, what should you buy, what should you pass on, check it out. Wednesday, all the PS4 to PS5 upgrades that we have confirmed so far. It's a large list, but we also talk about how you actually upgrade your games from PS4 to PS5. There is a caveat there, so if you don't know, check out that video. And we'll continue the PlayStation 5 coverage. We've got 6 weeks to go now, so not many LTPS episodes. We're probably going to trying to shoot for more like Monday, Wednesday uploads, but again, if there's no Monday upload, we'll have one on Tuesday. You know the formula at this point. But that's it. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.